Hey there, Genesis International College students. Let's jump right in. Today, we're focusing entirely on Topic 1 of your CPCCBC5111 unit, preparing an organizational environmental management plan. Think of this explainer as your ultimate step-by-step guide to translating some pretty complex regulatory requirements into a practical blueprint. Because as future builders, senior managers, and construction pros, it's going to be on you to develop strategies that reduce environmental risks on your sites. And honestly, the stakes are incredibly high. So our goal today is to make this whole process crystal clear, super structured, and most importantly, ready to actually use in the real world. We've got 4 main phases to get through today. First up, laying the foundation, followed by setting the standard, then breaking it all down, and finally drafting that final blueprint. We're going to build your understanding of an environmental management plan, or EMP for short, exactly like you'd build a physical structure from the ground up. But before we even pour the concrete on our legal foundation, we really need to ask a pretty crucial question. What actually happens when a construction project just ignores the environment? Look, as site managers, you're dealing with tight deadlines, strict budgets, crazy logistics. It can be super tempting to view environmental paperwork as just another bureaucratic hurdle. But treating it as an afterthought, that is literally one of the fastest ways to completely derail your entire project. At a bare minimum, ignoring environmental laws is going to hit your project's wallet hard. And we aren't just talking about a little slap on the wrist here. Without a rock-solid EMP, your site could face official notices or severe fines running into the tens of thousands of dollars. And it gets worse. If the breach is severe enough, authorities can literally seize your construction goods, stopping your work dead in its tracks. In the absolute worst-case scenarios, non-compliance can lead to individuals or even entire companies being completely excluded from lucrative building programs. So yeah, creating your EMP isn't just about saving trees. It's absolutely crucial for saving your project from catastrophic operational delays and massive expenses. Okay, let's get into phase 1, laying the foundation by building a regulatory framework. Your regulatory framework is essentially what keeps you legally compliant, and constructing it requires a very specific 3-step procedure. Step 1, you've got to identify which environmental laws are actually relevant to your specific project. Things like local EPA regulations. Step 2, describe exactly how those laws apply to your day-to-day project activities. Like, how does a local water act affect your site sediment runoff? And step 3, organize all that generated information into a clear, easily accessible table. By laying out these steps logically, you're ensuring that every single legal requirement has a direct counterpart in your operational plan. It's all about mapping the law directly onto your daily work on the site. Moving right along to phase 2, setting the standard through benchmarking and goals. Here's the thing. Just knowing the law isn't quite enough. You really need to look at industry best practices. Those practices that have proven to be highly useful in meeting shared industry goals. You do this by consulting frameworks like the Australian standards or ISO, and you run them through a continuous benchmarking cycle. It goes like this. You start by planning what to benchmark, searching for the right industry partners or data, and then collecting and analyzing that data. But here's the most crucial part of the whole cycle: adapting. You absolutely cannot just copy and paste an ISO standard. Think about it. A high-rise project in downtown Sydney has a vastly different footprint, climate, and organizational structure compared to a residential build in a regional town. You must adapt the standard to your specific reality. So the next big step is translating those adapted benchmarks into actionable goals. Say your benchmarking shows you need to focus on emissions. Well, your goal might be reducing your carbon footprint. But a truly good EMP requires goals that are 2 specific things: specific and measurable. Specific means the scope is well restricted so you avoid overlap and everyone knows exactly who the responsible parties are. Measurable means you can easily quantify the steps taken and the progress made. Rule of thumb, if you can't measure it on the site, it doesn't belong in your EMP. All right, on to phase 3, breaking it down by analyzing project requirements. To connect those big, lofty environmental goals directly down to your daily operations, you're going to rely heavily on what's called a work breakdown structure, or WBS. Now, by definition, a WBS is just a method used to break down a massive project into smaller, manageable components known as work packages. Kind of think of these work packages as the individual rooms in our building metaphor. So you might pull out a work package specifically for site excavation and ask, okay, what are the specific environmental obligations like dust control for this exact package? Doing this helps you pinpoint potential impacts way before a single shovel even hits the dirt. Which brings us to our final stage, phase 4, the final blueprint, where we draft the EMP and evaluate risk. So, you've got your legal framework, your industry benchmarks, your measurable goals, and your work packages all lined up. Now it's time to draft the actual document. Every EMP has to contain these core sections: the front matter, the background, the actual environmental management section, and finally, the implementation strategy. And crucially, it must prominently document emergency contact details. Look, when a pipe bursts and muddy water is flooding straight toward a storm drain, nobody has time to dig through 50 pages of academic jargon to find a phone number, right? The document absolutely must be user-friendly for all your stakeholders. Now, a massive part of that management section is evaluating risk. In fact, risk is really the central aspect of environmental management. To figure out your risk rating, deciding whether a risk is high, serious, medium, or low, you have to weigh two factors against each other: severity versus likelihood. Severity asks, how serious would the potential environmental impact be if it actually happened? While likelihood asks, what is the actual probability of that impact occurring in the first place? Balancing these two factors dictates just how aggressively you need to plan out your environmental controls. And really, this all comes down to translating the EMP to the job site. When you picture a site manager out there in the field, it brilliantly illustrates why all of this preparation matters so much. This paperwork, this blueprint you've just spent all this time drafting, ultimately dictates the physical actions taken on a noisy, active, muddy construction site. It isn't just academic theory, it becomes the daily operational reality for your staff and contractors. Which leaves us with one final critical thought for you Genesis students to take away today. You've drawn the blueprints for your EMP. You have a plan that is legally and technically sound, but a blueprint is just a piece of paper until the crew gets to work. So how will you ensure your team actually builds it? How are you going to inform your staff, monitor their compliance, and manage the data gathering systems out on site? Well, that is the exciting challenge of EMP implementation, and exactly where your studies will be taking you next. Keep learning, keep evolving, and we will see you next time.